There we go. All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Masters 2020. We're going to give everyone a couple of moments to get on the call. Well, hello all. Thank you for joining us. We are so glad you could be here. Welcome to our MTA 201-301 Design Proficiency course. We are very, very excited to have you here. We have over 1,700 people registered for today's event. This is pretty phenomenal. We are so glad you could be here with us. Thank you for saying good morning. Thank you for saying hello. It is a pleasure to have you all here. Joining us today are a wonderful group of individuals, and I'd like to take the time to introduce them all. We have with us myself. I'm going to introduce myself first. Richard Sasson. I'm the Global Director of Technical Services. I will be your host throughout the MTA events over the next month. We are joined today by Mr. Jonathan Garcia, who is our Technical Director for Crestron Canada. We have our esteemed colleague, Mr. Ronnie Vandenboom from Sales Support Management of Crestron EMEA. And of course, Mr. Jason Molden, our Technical Director for the UC Enterprise platform. And he has been one of the key architects of the entire MTA program. So we are glad to have all of these wonderful people here to speak to you, to work with you. We are going to be recording this session. The session will be posted on Online Help ID 2015 in a couple of days after the event, along with a copy of the presentation and the question and answers that are going to take place between us in the chat window. In addition to that, the reason this is a live event, we will be polling you for questions from us to you for your answers to further discussion as well. So we look forward to working with you. We will be stopping throughout the presentation to answer questions live. We will be answering questions in the chat windows as well. So we're very excited about this, and we want to tell you a little bit about the MTA program. So this was started a couple of years ago. We'll give you a slide about that. But because of everything that has happened, as you all know, we had hoped to do this as a live event in Orlando, Florida, and in Madrid, Spain. Unfortunately, the world has changed, and I truly hope that you are all safe and healthy. I hope that none of your families have had a major impact due to what has happened. We have all been impacted by it, but hopefully you're all safe and healthy. So what we decided to do, because of what has happened, is take the event to a digital scenario. So let's go ahead and show you that wonderful thing. How did we arrive here? So as I said, we originally had this event scheduled for Orlando in April and in May. And of course, with everything that happened so quickly, so dynamically, we wanted to still continue to have the event. And initially, we had planned to do this in October. We tried postponing things, making things fit into various schedules, and then we realized we couldn't guarantee your safety or ours. And that was a big concern for us. We were very worried about everyone being safe moving forward. So we said, okay, let's change the entire concept of Masters for 2020. We wanted to bring it to you virtually. We digitized the entire event. So throughout the month of May, we have the MTA track. And throughout the month of June, we have the Master's Certification Program tracks. Why did we separate those out? To allow people flexibility, to allow people the opportunity to get both if they're a Master's Certified Programmer. If you wish to become a Master's Technology Architect for the first time ever, we opened it up to all of our dealers and partners. Now you can take the entire MTA track in the month of May. And Jason will tell you a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. But I wanted to share it with you, and let's talk about the schedule real quick so you can see what we're going to be doing in the month of May. We have a full lineup of courses beginning today for Cinco de Mayo, for those who are having fun with that one, is the MTA 201, our design proficiency course. We have our MFX 201, which is presented by Mr. Molden as well on May 7th. And then we see a series of MTA courses throughout the month of May. We have sessions on the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. So next week, every day at 11 a.m. Eastern, okay, we have the MTA courses available. The following week on the 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd, we have additional courses, each in different subjects. And on top of that, on the 26th, 27th, 28th, and 29th, that is where we wrap up the MTA track. We then begin the following week with the MCP, or Master Certified Programmers track. This is a wonderful opportunity for all of you to get a certification in becoming a Master's Technology Architect for Crestron. Now, you will need to take an exam in June to accomplish the actual certification. You will need to take 12 of the 16 posted courses. It's important. This one is a critical requirement. So we are so glad you've joined us. We are very excited that you are here. And if you missed something, you can still register for it. You can modify it. You can just email us at rsvp@crestron.com if you want to make changes. But here is the virtual Masters schedule on our website, www.crestron.com/masters. You've probably already been there because you're here now. And we're so glad that you could join us. What I'd like to do at this point is take the time to turn over the call to Mr. Jason Molden so he can tell you a little bit more about the Master's Technology Architect program, because between himself and myself, with our team of technical directors around the world, we crafted this incredible coursework for you to become even more empowered to provide the best solution to solve the problems for your customers, to generate more business for you and your customer satisfaction as well. So Jason, if you'd be so kind, my good sir, why don't you take the next section?
Thanks, Rich. And thanks to everybody joining the call. You know, we're disappointed that we're not there in person. I think that as a community of individuals, whether you be from the design track or from the programming track, I think we can all appreciate that one of the things that we won't necessarily have the opportunity to take advantage of this year with Masters is the element of community. And so we have the Q&A. We encourage you not only to share with us, but also connect with some of your colleagues. I'm sure as you go through the session and you see a question up, or others that are attending as well, we invite you to reconnect. You know, I don't think we'll do it today, but we're going to throw out some links. If you're on social media and you're tagging anything about Masters, just like we do in person, we want to do everything we can to try to replicate that in-person experience, because we know it's partially about content, but it's also about community. Those conversations that you have with each other in the hallway or over lunch, or you know, with Crestron engineers or technical directors, whoever's there. We want to do everything we can with this year, and we're all very focused on returning back to that community aspect this year. But myself, Rich, the team here, our wonderful events team, all the work that they've done behind the scenes to put this together, we're very thankful for them, and we're thankful for you at the same time. So let me give you a little bit of background about the Master Technology Architect program. I'm a big follower of social media. I don't comment very much, but I do get an opportunity to read through a lot of the comments. And the one thing I've seen probably more than anything else in the last couple of weeks is just some general questions about what is MTA, how does it relate to the programming track, and what are the differences. So a little bit of history from the Masters community. We were always founded as the group of individuals focused on programming. We started in 2001. We're almost at that mark, the 20-year mark for Masters. Many of us have been there every single time. You know, in recent years, our attendance has exploded. So the genesis or the way we went through creating Masters, we originally started at Crestron headquarters just outside New York in Rockley, New Jersey. And the session has developed from there. We went from being in the factory at one point in our regular training rooms. We expanded to local hotels around the office, and then we started to get bigger and bigger. And about 4 years ago, it really became an event in the trade show sense, in the large scale sense. So in 2019, the picture there, last year, we hosted at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut for the USA event in Madrid, Marriott Madrid. for EMEA, and we hosted about 1,300 programmers and designers last year. We were on target. You may have seen the announcements. We'd actually sold out for this year, but obviously due to some challenges, our attendance is actually up quite a bit. We went through the numbers last night. Rich and I were looking, and we are, with our virtual registration, the MTA segment has grown to 10 times its regular size, which is really a testament to our customers, our partners who are interested in our technology, but also this element of knowledge gain and everyone wanting to grow their own skills and continue to keep the wheels moving while we're in this current state in the economy and in the environment both. So if you think about that, I mentioned, we've been going strong with programming for 19, soon to be 20 years. And about 4 years ago, 2017, from an event standpoint, we started to recognize a bit of a shift in dynamics. And there were changes at both ends of the spectrum. We ended up with a case where our programming topics really started to accelerate. And a lot of that was down to the fact that Crestron's moving towards more open standards and leveraging existing technology and software that's out there in the world. And the first part of that, obviously, was the foray into start to use Simple Sharp as an augmented language for native development. And then also we're starting to see user interface move that way as well. We're thinking about HTML5 and the move in that direction. So what that did is it started to stretch the community a little bit, where certain things were no longer considered programming knowledge, if you will. It became more of a general technology knowledge. And so we ended up with this gap a little bit. And in order to facilitate or promote our high-level programmers and developers at this point to be able to pursue those topics, we needed to augment our community with the design community as well, because they're doing equally important work as the programmers would. Many of the decisions had shifted. It used to be that we would design a system, it'd be a black box, and then you'd hand it over to the programmer. Myself and Jonathan, worked as programmers in the field for a number of years. Here's the spec, here's the box, go ahead, make it work. But what we get to is design has changed a little bit. There are elements within these solutions that if the design is not done up front, then the programmer isn't able to make a successful solution. Think of AV over IP for one example. The fundamental design is done at the network switch level, understanding coexistence with a customer network or being standalone. All those things fall into the design realm. Now, they may be executed by the programmer or by the designer, but that's what created this need for this community. So in 2017, collectively within Crestron, we made this decision to expand our community and start to find ways to bring in other disciplines. And the most notable or important inclusion we needed to make at that point was the design community. So we got things moving. 2018, we released it almost as a soft launch. We had a pretty small community to see if we could get traction. When we went from 2018 to 2019, we doubled. And then moving into this year, had we been in person at the actual events, we would have doubled again year over year from 2019 in terms of the number of individuals we were going to include inside the program. And so, this is year 3. And along with that, we have some maturity. We've started to shuffle a little bit internally in terms of, how Rich approaches masters and where we architect content and where we place it. We've started to move into that as well. And so really, as I mentioned, we're looking at this. It's not a pure separation. We still have overlap, but really what we wanted to do is we wanted to give yourselves, we want to give our partners that ability to focus on the particular segment of the market that was key to them. So if you think of Master Certified Programmer, the courses that Rich mentioned we're going to offer in June, we're talking about Simple Sharp, we're talking about the C# based language, we're talking about HTML5, and then we also get into deployment strategies at a coding level. How do I use PowerShell or other technologies to better facilitate, because that skill set for that particular item is programming, right? That's where we wanted to leave that. And we move to the designers and we think about the architects. This is where we come into play with design technology. How do I deploy a solution? NVX, for example. How do we think about BYOD and this new emerging market into unified communications and specifically platform-based rooms? Not necessarily programming, we're putting in credentials and we're making it work. So we think about it a little bit differently than authoring code, and that becomes our separation between the two. Okay. So Rich mentioned it. I want to highlight it a little more in depth. Maybe this will prompt some questions. Like Rich said, we're going to look at all the Q&A. We're going to answer as much as we can live. And then after the fact also, we'll be following up. So if this is your first or second year of attendance or participating in the MTA track, as Rich mentioned, you want to attend 12 of the 16 sessions live. The live component is where we're performing our reporting to give you credit for attendance in those classes. The other part is you will, if you complete those minimum of 12 of 16, sometime in the middle to end of June, we're going to supply an exam, which will be the MTA exam. And at that point, you'll be able to achieve your MTA certification. We track it in the same method as we track our certification of programming. On the flip side, if you've attended in 2018 and 2019, then you fall into a little bit of a different category. Still have the same requirement to take 12 of 16. You'll still have the same exam to complete for this year. But what it will provide you is in the similar fashion that our programmers achieve through different markers of certification, our MTA partners are going to do the same thing. And so in that case, in July, we'll actually release a silver exam. So if you're familiar with programming, or if you're not, every 3 years, there's a marker where you can take an exam, or every 3 years of attendance, excuse me, you can take an exam, and that allows you to move to the next level. So the programming track, we have silver, we have gold, we have platinum, and now we have diamond. And if you're familiar with our diamond instructors, they're an elite community in the development realm. They teach at our sessions. You know, we treat them like our own at that point. Those individuals have made such an investment in Crestron over the years that, you know, they're wrapped into our community. We want to do the same thing for our design community as well. So if you've attended twice already, and this is year 3, then at that point, you'll have the eligibility to test for silver. And so that follows the same track that we do with our programmers. So if you attended 2018, 2019, and you complete 2020, that'll give you the exam, and then going into next year, you fall into that MTA Silver category, and then from there, you can continue to progress, just like our programming community does as well. Okay. Quick note about RUs. I know it's a popular topic. Obviously, you know, everybody's working on continuing education, staying current, enhancing your skills right now in light of the economy. But just to reference or to remind you, to achieve the MTA certification, that also goes along with your RUs. So that certificate that you'll receive once you complete 12 and pass the exam, that is what you'll submit back to AVIXA for your redemption, I guess, as you call it, for RUs. And we provide 12 RUs for the MTA sessions. The other thing it will also do that I want to highlight, it was also put you into the early registration category for our 2021 in-person events. That'll be important because year over year, we've executed a slow growth in the MTA, get traction, enhance content, things like that. Next year will be different. We're bringing, you know, potentially 1,700 people into the MTA community over the next month or so. And so what we'll actually do is we will prioritize registration for the in-person events next year based on holders of the certification. And then we'll have a general announcement to open everybody else. And certainly, Rich, we've created some challenges for you thinking about next year in terms of how many people will be attending, but it's a good problem to have, and we're very appreciative that you're with us today. On the flip side,
we're actually excited, Jason, about that crazy way we're going to go next year. We certainly hope next year we can go back to a live event. I know a lot of people are asking on the chat side, are we going to be able to offer both, take both, a mix and match? So that's something we're definitely going to be looking at to continue to make it a great event for our customers.
Great, thanks, Rich. On the flip side, everyone has requirements. Obviously, all of us are working through different challenges. If you're not able to attend the 12 sessions live over the next month, it doesn't mean that you don't have access to the content. You can attend as many as you want, and it becomes knowledge gain, and really to keep your skills sharp, to be exposed to new technology topics, to interact with others in the industry through the Masters community. All that will be there as well. So just keep that in mind, that it's not an all or nothing. Certainly, if you're interested in the RU component and you're looking to achieve the certification, there are the requirements laid out for you. At the same time, as Rich mentioned, these will be recorded after the fact. You can go back and you can watch them. Maybe you attend 12 of 16, but there's one you didn't get to, no problem. Certainly, you're achieving your requirement for the certification track, but you can also go back and you can have an opportunity to watch all of them. And we've always done that with Masters. Rich mentioned it's posted on the website. So we have a particular online help ID where all the content is stored. We just put it out there because year over year, there's always a conversation. Hey, we talked about the Masters 2018. There's a great deck on it. Why don't you go back and watch it? We want to put as much of that out there for our community as possible. Okay, that wraps up our intro, I guess, if you will, Rich, in terms of talking about the change, as well as just some background on what the MTA is. So any particular questions we want to take at this point?
Yeah, just a couple of things came up repeatedly just to make sure everyone understands. We were able to go to the full MTA track after we posted our first 3 MTA courses, I'm sorry, our first master's courses in April. And so one of the MTA courses is actually available online on ID 2015. Everyone keeps asking, will this presentation be posted? Yes, it is going to be posted. Online Help ID 2015, Master's Presentations 2020. That will be there for you. They get posted 2 to 3 days after each event. It'll come with the video, with the presentation in a PDF format, along with the questions and answers filtered for things that are relative, you know, so that's important. As to MTA Silver, to be able to get the Silver for MTA, this would be the 3rd year. You will need to have attended all 3 MTA sections or sessions to be eligible for the Silver exam. In 3 years from now, we'll get to the gold level of MTA, and so that'll proceed and move forward from that. This is a really cool thing for people to learn how to design and architect systems. If you wish to become a programmer, all of our training is now available on crestron.com/training/events for programming training. We have virtualized every course we offer. So the great news is you can get trained on how to program as well if that's what you want to do and you are a Crestron dealer or partner joining us on these sessions, which everyone here should be. So that is a lot of the really cool things that we've been able to do in this very, very short time frame to be able to get you the information you need. And for those of you who have the time, can fit it in, we really would love for you to join us. We are going to continue virtualized training for Crestron through the end of July, absolutely, and possibly through August. We haven't made that decision yet. Again, your safety and ours is important. The good news is MTA is not a requirement to be a programmer. It is an intent for you to become a certified Crestron design engineer, which is why we have such a diverse range of people here to present to you today to get across the perspective of how to design, how to architect, and how to implement systems for Crestron, which is a wonderful component for what we need to do. You only need to pass 12 classes or take 12 sessions and pass the exam to get your credits for CEDIA or AVIXA. Okay, the key here is passing the exam to get the credits, which is important. The idea is that we want you to be able to take the knowledge, apply it, and use it for other areas in the industry as well. Jonathan, any other fun stuff that I missed and that's been going through on the chat side? Oh,
no, I mean, that's most of it. You know, everybody's asking about, again, you know, do they have to take the classes live? Can they watch the recording? There's some questions about the test. Obviously, as the test becomes available, we'll provide some information, both on its format and how it has to be completed.
And the test, for that comment, Jonathan, the test is provided through our regular mechanisms. So if you've gone through anything related to programming, in your portal on the website, it gives you a list of available exams. So last year we did it just for reference, twofold. The test shows up in your exam and says you have a new exam available. We also put out a blast to those individuals to say, you know, go look at your portal and log in. And so you'll know it's there, but we provide visibility. We'll do the same thing in July with those that are eligible for Silver. Once we see the numbers that come through on the 3rd year here in 2020, then those individuals will be contacted for availability of the exam. When we put those exams out, all your questions will be answered. We put the instructions with the exam as well. Here's the amount of time, here's the format, things like that. So it'll all be covered for you at that point.
Right, and keep in mind, as you said, you know, Jason, there's the regular MTA exam and then there's the Silver exam.
Correct.
Please note the Silver exam will be much harder. Okay, yes. It's not just getting credit for taking the courses and acknowledging, understanding what was been taught, but really to apply yourself as a designer. This is the same thing we do to the programmers. We give them really detailed, and the programmers on the call can tell you that some of those Silver and Gold exams are a royal pain in the tuchus. Okay, they're challenging, they push you hard, and we'll be doing similar things like that, because if you're going to get that level of certification, you truly need to prove that you understood the concepts that are being provided and you're able to provide solutions to your customers, which is what it's all about.
We're at the end, just to wrap up on this, we're at the wide range of a spectrum, right? When we think about the master's community, certainly there's some exclusivity to the master's community. The individuals in the master's community have really honed their craft they've made a big investment. They've made an investment themselves. They made an investment in Crestron that we appreciate. And the main thing is trying to find a middle ground, right? So the reason that we have the requirements for the number of classes, number one, to make sure that those individuals invested at the same time. We're making an online and a virtual, so we have to make sure that there's some legitimacy to it. And so as a result of a number of conversations that Rich, myself, and others have had over the last couple of months, we felt that this was the best arrival point, was a blend of participation and then also the appropriate exam that goes with it. Because it's masters. It's a large, important community to Crestron, and we want to bring in as many people as we can into that community through that regular process that we have. So let's roll into the next section. Jonathan Garcia is going to help me a little bit with this one. For reference, Jonathan and I are both in the technical director role with Crestron. It is a hybrid role, if you will. We bend or blur the line in between technical and sales. Most of our work is done in the pre-sales component, so we work alongside designers. There are 14, there's domestically, at least in the US, we have more than 20 technical directors. We also have individuals around the world that focus in the same role. And really the MTA is brought out a lot of us. So over the next month or so, you'll see a number of technical directors involved with both our research and development teams, as well as our support teams. We have a number of cases where we're bringing all different factors of Crestron into the mix. So Jonathan and I put together some highlights, and we wanted to talk about what we see in terms of the changing role of designers, and we wanted to highlight a few things. For this session, we were doing in person. Obviously, this is one of those cases where we wanted to be able to bounce around and go back and forth. And so we welcome you to do that in the Q&A and the chat as well at the same time. So coming into 2020, we had some specific goals for the MTA track. We wanted to continue to offer a wide range of classes. As Rich mentioned, if you look at that calendar, the letter extension gives you a little bit of insight into the category, M for masters, and then whatever it might be. So I'm teaching MFX on Thursday, so that's masters with flex focus. And so that'll kind of guide you through what the platforms are. But we wanted to offer this wide range of courses, and really what we wanted to do is we wanted to analyze our content and take content that was not necessarily development or coding related and bring that into the design community and increase the type of content we were bringing in. At the same time, we also want to make sure that our design community and individuals that are working in that space are prepared for some of the changes that are coming in the future, trends that we see from a manufacturing standpoint. We're both, Jonathan and I, heavily involved with end users. So we take a lot of those requests in and we move those back through to our R&D team, but really to give you some insight on what's changing in that space. So we highlighted a few. Jonathan, I'll go back and forth on talking about some of these. I'll take the first one here, which is just a change in process that we all need to be aware of as designers. Traditionally, when we thought about design, it was threefold. Customer has a requirement. We'll create a design for that requirement. I need a multi-purpose room, okay? Start thinking about that. How big is it? A number of the questions and factors that came in were typically logistical or space related. How big is the room? How tall is the ceiling? How many people do you want to fit in the room? Things like that. We would then take that, put it into a design. We hand it over, procurement would bring in the gear, the install team would install it, and then we'd roll into this service category. And that was our general cycle that we followed in AV for a number of years. As we move into this change dynamic, we start to include other items. So moving left to right there. A big component of the design community now, or the design process, is consulting. And a lot of that is driven by these platforms that we talk about, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, others, Cisco WebEx, whatever it might be. As those technologies start to move into these spaces, we have to perform that initial consult before we get to the point where we're even capable of designing to figure out what they have. How can we work with that? We're moving around the horn there. Deployment is a strategy. We actually have a session later on in the month talking about deployment strategies to educate our design community on how you might go about deploying a solution. PowerShell, auto update, XIO Cloud, some of these other technologies to be able to move the systems in. And in a holistic design, deployment has to be one of the factors that we think about. Just because you design it, when you're thinking about additive costs of this particular solution plus deployment, maybe it's a lower cost design solution, but it takes more labor hours to install. We also have to think about the opposite, where we're thinking about maybe it's a slightly larger cost of entry, but it's easier to deploy. that's going to be something that's going to follow the design community, because by the time we get to the team in the field, they're not thinking about deployment. They're thinking about their calendar and their schedule. So we have to factor that in. The last item I mentioned there is reporting. There's a significant desire, and I think personally, we're going to see the desire for reporting continue to increase through the changes in the world, and there will now be an element. So I've made my design, I've added my products, I've talked about connectivity, how do I control the projector, how do I bring the laptop into the system? Now I have to think about what details or what analytics can I create as a result of the design process I've gone through. Again, a little foreshadowing, we have another session later in the month where we're going to be talking about designing for data, and that's one of the key examples there that we're looking at. Okay. Jonathan, you want to take this one?
Sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of changes that happen in terms of how we approach design, and part of that again is the evolution of technology. As technology evolves, as we move into smarter devices, we at Crestron talk a lot about the IoT of things. I tell the story when I do presentations typically about today if you went to Best Buy and had to buy a refrigerator, if it doesn't have Wi-Fi capabilities and you can't watch cat videos or look up a recipe, you're probably looking at a different model. So that also, affects the way we look at design. What other features, what other capabilities, what other advancements are available to us that we can leverage across our design. Certainly the changes in control availability. Again, things like touchscreens, things like the ability to use our own personal devices to interact with the various systems, and the different technology pieces that are within those, so whether that's Bluetooth, whether that's near-field capabilities. There are lots of other ways that we can leverage these pieces within our design. And the other part of it, of course, is reduced margins, right? We're all in business. We all still need to make money. So what do we need to do to maximize that capability? Do we need to use things like configured systems? Do we need to reduce engineering? Do we need to offer standardized systems where customization then becomes an add-on? So similar to what happens in other industries where we've packaged particular things, and now these become additional features. So if you want to add a customized interface, that becomes an add-on piece, and there's a development price associated with that. So these are the things that we are looking at from a design perspective, things that change within the industry, and we think are important as we approach design as a whole.
I think we had a question, Rich, that we were going to ask the community at this point too about this. This is one of the topics that we had discussed. Is when we think about the second point there, and we think about changes in control availability. I would say that potentially, I don't know, 8 out of 10 conversations I have revolve around some conversation of design with APIs. Does this have a REST API? How can I go about accomplishing this? We've seen a standard or stock decline in RS-232 availability. It's still the tried and true method, but it doesn't pass security requirements anymore because there is no method of authentication or challenge in an RS-232 format. So I think we'll let the poll go here as people weigh in, but get your take on it, because we see that as the number one thing. It used to be that you would call Crestron and say, how many RS-232 ports does your device have? Or you'd call a projector manufacturer and make sure that you had the specific model that included that, because it used to be a premium item to get RS-232 on a device. And now the conversation has shifted over, and we end up at a point where API becomes the question. Does your product have an API? How accessible is it? What's the format? Where can I download details, et cetera, things like that.
And of course, that's the other part of API, Jason, right, is the language. Now that, again, as Crestron, as we've evolved into, again, other languages, the conversation around C# opens up that ability to talk to so many other systems. I remember at Masters a few years ago teaching things like BACnet. That was such a foreign concept at the time, to be able to integrate with an HVAC system or with a BMS system natively, was such an early concept for us in the AV world that, now the ability to directly through C# integrate with things like Ruby or PHP or Perl and now really, get real data and provide real data to other dashboards or to other systems through that availability of other languages. It's really quite powerful.
Looks like our polling is starting to trickle in there, Rich. I'll let you make the call and whatever, but I think there's a pretty resounding response that we will see from the community here.
Yeah, well, so far out of 1,200 and wow, it keeps going up, 1,260 people approximately, 82% say API is the new RS-232. Congratulations to the new API.
I think the other thing too, whether you're a programmer or not, one of the changes Crestron has made in recent years, we have a microsite specifically for conversations about some of the API development in the other languages. Developer.crestron.com is a code site effectively that we've launched, and we encourage our programming community to go there. But if the concept is new, then certainly that's enough of an example to show you what the approach is and how we're embracing that and trying to make that information more available to you.
Great. And we've ended the poll. Thank you, Jason.
So you can share the results there, Rich, and everybody sees it. And there we go. All right, let's move on to the next topic here in the mix.
All righty.
And talk about programming versus configuration, the topic I want to go into. I think it's been a constant change. I think that as a community, we constantly reevaluate or examine what constitutes each function. I don't think by any means this is a static topic. It's very dynamic, especially when the ceiling for programming skill we've basically broken through the ceiling in the last couple of years with some of the enhancements and the work that our teams have done to provide additional tool sets and be able to leverage existing technology or existing knowledge, if you will. And so it's changed the discussion. I think if I had to look back and we think about some of those early masters, in the mid 2000s, programming was programming, and that really was built around configuration of our products through a programming language in Simple Plus. And then as we moved into later years, start some of the other languages, we brought in Simple Plus as an enhancement. But I think as that ceiling shifts, we start to think about what the changes are. And what constitutes development is relatively new to our community. I know that there are many professional developers that have chosen Crestron as a career and as a language. But I think at this point now, we're actually seeing that come to fruition with these additional languages, that people are thinking architecturally about the solutions and not so much on a project basis. But as we think about this and we think about the Masters community, there's a number of things happening. First off, we've enhanced that language path, and we moved up, and now C# and HTML5 sit at the top. But at the same time, if we take that medium, we also move down. Crestron has our offering. We've looked to make our products function directly out of the box. So we call out of the box functionality or built-in functionality. We've also seen a number of our partners in the software and development community also launch their own. I know a number of customers, Crestron resellers, that have made the investment to create a framework of their own. So now they have that tool set. You're now starting to see investment in products, Mercury being one of them, where the entire experience was pre-built, and so that product requires configuration. Things like that. It's a dynamic moving space, but I think for our design community, what we're seeing is that overall, more of our designers are being tasked with the configuration layer topics. It doesn't necessarily require the programmer, or on the flip side, my programmer is so busy, Jonathan and I hear this nonstop. We can't get a cycle of time with the programmer to work on the job, so what else can we do? I think our design community, our MTA community, is the one that's going to grow in that space to get more familiar with how to set up a product, leverage the framework that the developer or the programmer has built, and then go in and make the configuration and the tweaks and the changes. And so we can all benefit. But I think it's a pretty constant movement or constant change as we evaluate what actually constitutes programming. The last one there too, what level of programming is actually required? I think from the Crestron community, we promote knowledge, not necessarily, writing the program, but if as a designer, you understand where the edge is, if you understand the tools that are available, not to mean that you need to necessarily write the program, but if you understand what can or can't be done, then you can better design your solution. It's a better handoff to your programming or development team that way. So we always encourage, foundational knowledge of figuring out what can be done with the systems. More often than not, as you move into the custom solutions with Crestron, our forte has always been you can do whatever you want. But I think it's an important change to look at for our design community, that our design community shouldn't necessarily separate, oh, that's the programmer's job. Because what we have to do in order to free our programming community up to write higher level development and do those things, the design community, we need to get our arms around a bit more of that and figure out what our place in the mix is with programming. We'll take some questions. I think Jonathan, we'll go through these and we'll kind of wrap some questions at the end of this particular session. So. Thinking about, yep, sorry, Rich, go ahead.
Sorry, did you want to take it at the end or did you want to discuss now?
If there's something pertinent, like I said, I mean, our intent for the session at Masters was likely that people are going to be yelling and throwing things at Jonathan and I, so I'm more than welcome to take some questions now.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, most of the questions have just been around, again, in terms of things like, programming versus configuration. People are looking at things like AV framework, and so there's questions around, can I theme AV framework? And we know today that the answer is no. There are some opportunities, of course, to customize or to, let's say, personalize AV framework. So you can do things today like add a logo. You can do things today like change the background, but you can't, reskin it as a whole. There are some other opportunities, again, to use some of that capability across some of the different systems. And so, like even today, with the release of Air Media, new firmware that was released today that allow things like customization of the help page. I know that we've seen customers in the field do this previously, where they're putting a graphic, but now truly customize it in a way that's meaningful for them. And whether that's redirecting them to an internal site where they can download the application or do those things, we're making those things more and more available across the suite of product.
I do think there's an interesting question that came up here. What role would codecs play now that Zoom and WebEx and others are coming along? And I think that that's something we should discuss later in our session that came up, because I thought it was a good question. Yeah, and there was a security question that came up is, why do I need security in a direct connection device? Now, we actually have a full course on security, and I think it's a good one to take and discuss in that one. But it is important to protect your devices when they're on in a space. It is more and more critical, and that's by default. We're going to be doing that on all of our products to ensure security is enabled, and we'll cover that further.
And Rich, I think there's two things, right? If we think about what's changed in California, and we think about some of the things with the new California law that when the products ship out, you have to have the dynamic password, with the influence that he has into Canada, is thinking about GDPR requirements and regulations. One of the things that when we think about security, we almost have to take a step back a little bit and think and not put ourselves in the conversation. And it's more of a case where we need to operate a little bit defensively, that will be the expectation. Let's say you have a direct connect system and at some point there's an audit that comes in. You don't want to be on the wrong side of that necessarily. When we think about, Jonathan, I get it all the time. End user will call us directly, questioning or evaluating what has been provided, what has been sold, what has been installed. In many cases, it's a conversation where we have to talk about, the holistic solution and the approach. So I think if anything, Rich, we're starting to see a point with many of the end users that I'm speaking to or working with, is that physical security is no longer enough. It used to be a case where if you're behind closed doors and there was a access key for that door, no one could get to it. That mitigated or devalued the need for software-based security or those other methodologies. And I'm seeing a general change. I'm sure Jonathan's seeing the same thing in Canada, that's no longer necessarily good enough for many of these customers.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely right, Jason. And more to that point, again, security is, and we'll talk about this in the security session, security is not just physical security, it's again, device security, it's logging of those things. Even if we think about the physical security from the door access system, or, we can see who badged into a door. And being able to have those logs and see those things, that all forms part of really that security strategy.
Okay, let's move on to the next
I think
one.
before you,
Sorry.
I'm sorry, just
Yeah,
before you jump on, one of the things that is coming up quite a bit here, several people are asking about the impact of these configured systems for the programming community. Is the programmer going the way of the dinosaur? How does configured systems impact the need of a programmer? Where does that fit into the scope? So keep that in mind as we begin to move forward and discuss these items.
Sure, sure. Also, I'll make one comment really quick. When we think about that, it's never an either or. If you think about all of the solutions that are out there on the pre-configured side, and there's some great examples with Crestron. Let's take a product like Air Media, for instance. Air Media is a product that can be in a standalone format. It has its functions built in, but that second layer of customization or configuration, if I wanted to control a third-party display, I can write a driver and I can bring that driver in. If that particular driver is not in the database, that is going to become your intersection. And so I look at it more of as a cake approach, I think is maybe an analogy to look at it. You're talking about here's some foundation of configuration, but in every pre-configured system I can think of, there's always value for the programming. You know, just for reference too, from a background standpoint, Jonathan and I spent the bulk of our careers in the trenches doing programming. You know, we've been there, we've lived it. We probably, I don't know, get yelled at for considering ourselves programmers at this point in our careers. But it's never a case where it's an either or. As a programmer, I can always come in. If I decide I'm going to create my own AV framework for my company and I'm going to act as the architect or the developer, and then I'm going to allow the other team members to be able to perform configuration on the base code I built. It's a great relationship to be. So don't ever look at it, you know, in this linear fashion or this horizontal fashion. Think of it vertical in the fact that everything config can be enhanced or created, or, you know, the slide I'll talk about right here too, when we think about deployment. You know, writing the code for deployment, if I'm a programmer, it's still writing code. It isn't the fact that I'm only writing code in a particular language. If I embrace the element of being a developer and being a coder, it's not so much about what the role is, about what my net result is, and is there a product or something I'm created. So just for reference, when we think about that and we talk about that, I always look at it as a case where config, and then into programming and into enhancement, and then into development. And it's this stack, if you will, that there's a place for everyone in that mix. So with that said, thinking about deployment schemes, we certainly encourage our design community to start thinking about how you go about deploying the solutions. You might be familiar with Crestron XIO Cloud. That is our Azure portal from which we can deploy and we can configure systems. There are other methods as well. From our programming community base, PowerShell is an incredibly important tool, both pre-install and post-install. On a pre-install, I can use it to configure devices. I can push out settings. We do that a lot in our Microsoft community when we're thinking about the Flex products and Teams rooms. There's a big element for PowerShell. Crestron actually, on the flip side, also uses PowerShell in a post-sale environment. We use it to query systems and gather data and things like that. But it's important that we think about not just finishing the design on paper, but how it's actually going to make it to the field and how we're going to get it out. The last note there is important. When we're thinking holistically with design, we shouldn't be at a case where we're only thinking about the core cost of the product. We need to think about the entire cycle of what is the cost of the product, you know, what are my implementation costs, and that reversal, right? Think about that scale when you think about your designs. It's not just the price, you also have to factor those other parts in, because for the most part that gets lost, and our community doesn't necessarily get to realize some of those gains by thinking about these additional tools. So make that part of your holistic design. There's security. Jonathan, you want to hit this one real quick?
Sorry, let me find my mute button. Yeah, absolutely. So again, we talk a lot at Crestron about security. You know, we've created a security council that internally looks at security. You know, we're always looking at you know, where there are particular vulnerabilities. We've adopted internally some mechanisms that allow us to track not only parts and hardware, you know, for things that you know, when we have component issues or when we have product issues, but also on the software side. You know, part of what we do uses some open source software, and so we're able to track those things. And so we think that, again, that's part of making a, you know, good hardware selection. Again, in my conversations when I'm working with designers, when I'm working with customers, one of the questions I always ask is, if this is on your network, how secure can we make the device? How do we make sure that that device is not going to be, you know, the weak part of the system? Depending on the customer, there's a different level of tolerance for that. If the system is not outward facing, if the system's going to live as an island unto itself, maybe that's less important. You know, maybe security is not the critical feature because we're only talking about an internal system. You know, I need to control AV in this room and it's not going outward. But as we make, again, those cloud connected systems, as we make those outward facing connections, that's always something we need to think about. And there are always updates. You know, we see this in our PCs, in our laptops, in our devices, whether they're Mac or PC or iOS device or Android device, there's always an update. There's always vulnerabilities. There's always things that we have to fix and we have to do. And so some of those things, you know, we can address through, again, features like our XIO Cloud that we just talked about. The ability to go through and, you know, if we discover that there's, you know, security loophole that needs to be fixed on a TSW panel, well, an organization might have hundreds of TSW panels. And so that ability to push that firmware really out to all of those devices through XIO Cloud is massive in terms of, again, scale and in terms of cost. So that's part of that. In addition to that, I've been, you know, answering some of the questions in chat and people have been asking about security. We have a website, security.crestron.com, that has a number of resources there, security guides, configuration guides for all of our products, processors, touch panels, XIO Cloud, Crestron Fusion. And so we give you all of the tools to help you harden the device and really make it compliant according to what your organization requires. That's different for every organization. One of the other great tools that we've had for a long time is within our toolbox software. We have the security audit tool. And that's another great way to go through and just do a quick analysis on where you're at. Where are the weak points? Are they things you need to fix? And again, this is something that will change based on the organization. You know, not every organization necessarily needs to have certificate-based control or needs to, you know, harden the device to a military spec. But if that is indeed your requirement, we have the tools to help you get there.
Excellent. Great point on the security website, Jonathan. When you have the presentation, we also have some resource links at the end too, and that's a big one. It's a great place to find some of that information. Okay. I'll let you continue to answer, Jonathan, so we can stay on track in the chat. Feel free, like I said, please continue to send questions in. You know, we'll answer in line or afterwards as well. I mentioned it, kind of wrapping up this areas of change section, that reporting is a huge key. When we think about the types of requirements for analytics, I would tell you that I think a year ago, 2 years ago, this might have been a nice to have category. And I think as we move forward, I think some of these details are going to continue to be more critical. Crestron Fusion has provided, you know, reporting and feedback for a number of years, but we're also now at a point where customers are choosing to apply some of their own reporting tools and leverage some of their own people or resources, if you will, to enhance that environment. The single pane of glass expectation is certainly there. I think the challenge is that just like our regular integration job that we go through as designers, sometimes achieving a single pane does require some additional lifting. We may have to export data in and out of one portal, bring it to another. You know, that's very popular in the community right now, is to be able to look to achieve that end goal. But in order to have a single pane of glass, we have to have data, right? So we think about intelligent systems. We think about what they're capable of reporting. How do we craft additional details? The other thing too is from a spend standpoint, the systems do need to justify their own existence. That a system needs to provide enough detail back to be used in a report to justify future spend. So as a designer, be a little bit selfish. Think about this in your own context, because if you design a system and you leverage that appropriate tool set to provide detail back and it can start reporting, then that's in your best interest, because now you're providing that additional value to the customer. And then that will, you know, roll forward. And okay, if this level of detail exists for this room, okay, well, that's a good investment. Now I can choose to build additional rooms and things along those lines. There's also a topic Jonathan and I talk about quite a bit, which is the leveraging your own resources. We're dealing with a lot of large-scale organizations who are choosing to bring their own analytic resources or employees to the mix. And so, I don't know, in the last couple of months or so, I've had 7 or 8 different consultations with Power BI developers or data analysts or data scientists trying to figure out what they can pull in and out of the system. So, you know, at a visibility level, If that's a skill that your company has, if it's something you want to invest in, great. There's a number of great resources out there to get your feet wet with Power BI and start jumping in. Also, ask your customers when you go through your consultation, your analysis phase as well. If that's something they have, you may be able to put some of their own internal resources to use to augment your design. The main thing we want to think about, right, is when we're looking at the designs, in some fashion, we want to make sure that the devices we're putting in or the systems we're putting in achieve that minimum level of intelligence to be able to provide detail back, because that keeps the ball rolling forward in all of our future designs. Okay, that wraps up that section. Jonathan, Rich, anything notable there on that? Otherwise, we can go ahead and move forward and get to some of our other topics.
We have AV design versus UC design, right? So there was lots of questions going on. There's discussions about security, which you guys covered in depth. So there's quite a lot of questions about that, and I think we've covered those kind of items. There are questions if XIO has an API. There is an available one, so you need to contact us, but we do have an API for XIO Cloud.
It's also referenced on the developer.crestron.com page. That's a good place to start with that.
So that is a huge place to look at. So absolutely, so it is there. So the question keeps coming up about how many sessions need to be attended. So we're going to go back, reiterate, it's 12 of 16, and take the exam at the end to get credit. Let's see what else we got here. A few questions about Fusion Cloud, XIO Cloud. There are courses about that you will cover as well. So I think we're okay on those. Visual Studio is no longer needed for Simple Sharp. You can use you're no longer trapped in Visual Studio 2008. You can use any version for 4 series processors. So that I see a lot of people answering questions in the chat, which is great.
Right.
So
that's community. That's what we've come to appreciate from a master's community, right? Certain cases when we think about these sessions live, and I hope all of you that have never been to a master's session in person before get a chance to go. But as presenters in these sessions, sometimes we just sit back, cross our arms, and let everybody in the room kind of figure it out. And that's what we love about this extended community that we have. So I'm going to dive into the next section here. We got 2 more sections left. This one is interesting because this is a little bit near and dear to my heart. About a year ago, Crestron started to break off a new team, if you will, within the organization, focused specifically on UC topics. Now, if you know me, number of years with Crestron, started in New Jersey and worked my way to Chicago eventually. AV was always, that was it. I was always in the AV community, worked for the company, always on the AV side of the products. And so when this new UC opportunity came up, it was very exciting. We now have a full team of individuals on the UC side, but from a context view, I was able to step back a little bit and watch some of my customers, my colleagues in the field, who were also making the same transition. And so what I wanted to do today, just for a few minutes here, is highlight some of the things and give you a little bit of insight as to what I see as the best approach when we start thinking about these platform-based solutions. Something we're going to go to in detail on Thursday, and then we have a number of other sessions. There's 2 additional great sessions about UC within the Masters MTA session you can also reference. So the interesting points I wanted to put out a lot of times come from, as Rich mentioned there, that Masters conversation, right? That I can be an independent party and sit back and watch these conversations happen. The platform set a different expectation. We may not be able to control that expectation because we have this additional person in the room, and that is the platform. That is the Microsoft Teams. That is the Zoom. And so we know that many of our customers are actually getting their initial touch or their initial knowledge about that platform from that individual and not from us. So when we start to enter the conversation about design, we have to accept that conversations have already happened, and there are probably some assumptions, some misconceptions, some information that's already there. And so when we think about UC, we're thinking about the customer expectation that it's a kit, it's in a box. I take it out, I put it down, I plug it in, I go. That is the norm, because that is the message coming from the platforms, the way that they promote the systems. If you've been through any of the corresponding training from either of those 2, you'll know that that's the messaging. So first approach, we have to know that we're not starting from 0 with the customer. We need to consult, and we need to figure out what their viewpoint is, and then we can figure out where to go forward. Rich, for this section, we're going to hold all the questions to the end. I'm going to go through the main topics, then we'll catch them at the very end.
Just before you go on there, Jason, just on that slide again, talking about the kit approach. You know, certainly from the IT perspective, that is their ideology, right? That's their mentality. They buy that kit of goods. You know, everything comes out of the box, it gets put together, and that becomes the system unto itself. So it can live in isolation as that kit or box approach.
Right. Excellent point, Jonathan. The next one I think is from an AV standpoint, we are all well aware of the viewpoint that potentially that has happened. I think even for myself personally, Jonathan could probably reflect the same thing. We're pulled into a conversation. I go into a conversation with a Teams technical specialist from Microsoft and a customer, and the instant perception is this guy over here represents legacy. AV is considered legacy in those cases, or think of the changes happening in the community. Many organizations, I know a number of schools, colleges, universities, where they've effectively said, you know what, we don't need the AV team. We're going to make that the responsibility of the IT team in that case. And sometimes that's met with some reluctance, you know, because of that viewpoint and where it's looked at. So it's very important that from our community, if we think traditional AV, that we find a way to bridge over and bring a little bit of value into that space. And so my best approach has been to simply partner. I don't go in and tell the particular IT guy, you know, what he should do or what he shouldn't do. I'm not focused on his, you know, or her, you know, potential lack of knowledge about AV. I come in alongside and I partner, and let me help guide you. Let me tell you what the rules are. It's kind of the manage up approach. If you think about it that way, I'm going to provide some questions and I'm going to take your feedback on it. And so that's been the consistent approach I've had with UC customers that I'm interacting with, is to really, you know, come in alongside and find that appropriate place. The other thing that we have to remember at the same time is, if we are traditionally AV, we would rally or we would invest to enhance our skills when we know something is coming, right? Crestron comes out with NVX 3 years ago at this point, a little bit over. And at that point, we had a swell from the community. I need to learn network configuration, switch configuration topics, things like that. AV has always been more rise to the challenge. The thing that we can't get lost here is the IT community traditionally doesn't have that amount of time available to them to do that. In many cases, it's more organizational change. The conversations that myself and Jonathan are having with customers, we are simultaneously educating the customers about the technology. What is a Teams room system? What is a Zoom room system? But we're also educating them about the platform. Did you know from the desktop in Teams you can do this? Did you know that the Zoom client is able to do this? And so we've come to realize that those customers may be thrown into this. Everybody's moved to this work from home strategy. We're seeing customer timetables go from 2 years to 2 months, or from 2 months to 2 weeks in terms of the amount of time that they have to completely flip their organization. So use your skills, come in alongside the customer as a partner, take the burden off of them so that the IT guy doesn't have to know, you know, pro DSP and working with, you know, some of the newer microphone arrays and how to configure lobes, or, you know, Audit or Dante traffic and things like that. Make sure you take that burden off them, but at the same time, come on alongside and explore the possibilities. But it's not a hole we have to dig out of, but it is a place where we know that there are misperceptions or misconceptions, and we need to work through those as we start to build our brand or build our value in the UC space. So to that point, what are those intersections? I have 3 big ones that I go through. When I talk with the customers, any mention of moving beyond a device that is just a USB speakerphone, a headset, or anything else, that is the floor, that's the gap that we move through. And so when I get to audio, you know, let the customer know this is a case where I can handle it. You want to put a Zoom room or a Teams room into that large divisible space? Absolutely, I can take care of that. You want to put it into a ballroom or things like that? We can handle the audio. Audio is the #1 place that we see some separation between the 2 disciplines. Video is another important one. Think about all the lessons that you learned as a Crestron partner since digital media came out in 2008. We know HDCP better than the IT community does. We know anything to do with video distribution and EDID. And you think about all those lessons, we have that, and we should use that to our benefit as we jump into this space. Because some of those points haven't necessarily encroached on the desktop experience, and those are great places to use our experience. The last one I put there is infrastructure, and I'll be specific about that. When we think about IT or UC infrastructure, we're traditionally thinking about Cat5e for everything over the network, but we can't lose sight of a couple things. As we start to move into newer technologies, and we think about camera technology, there are cases in which we will need to rely on infrastructure, and I'm talking higher grade infrastructure cables, shielding, anything along those lines to protect the integrity. Just because it's a USB device, it's a USB 3.0 or even now USB 3.1 device, doesn't mean that you can go to the electronics store or go to some other retailer and buy a 100-foot cable that's going to transmit that. There's still a place there where there's a solid intersection for your infrastructure skills to help enhance and be aware of those designs. Thinking about USB extensions and what many people are going through right now and evaluating USB 3.0 extensions. It's a pretty small community, but at the same time, the principles that you've learned of infrastructure also apply to that directly. And so I put those down as the three big things that there's a great place to intersect with the UC and with those designs and try to make that more holistic solution. Defensive design is another practice that I preach here, and we do have a number of customers. Our support teams will tell you that if you run too fast at a particular design, it may be challenging. So we recommend evaluating where the lines are. Within all of the UC systems, there are rules that either have to be followed. You can bend them slightly, or you can break them in your overall design, and you need to know where those places are. Audio is a good one for reference. Many of these solutions require certified devices. Once you get to the certified device, then maybe there are liberties that you can take in the rest of your fundamental design once it's not touching the solution, but it is something you have to work through. And we have to be familiar with the limitations, because you can bring value into the conversation by understanding what the rules are. If I took one of the room systems today only supports a single audience camera natively, but if I need more cameras, then I can leverage my AV skills, figure out a way to bring those devices together, create a method for control, and then bring that into the system. And so you have to really know where those places are. But the main thing is, if there was a point to make here, is understand what the fundamental rules are of the platform solution and know what is required and know what is optional in that case. You can't barrel through and say, I'm going to use that camera and I'm going to use this speakerphone and this device. You have to follow the platform recommendations, and then once you've done so, then expand back from there and work in the other direction. User interface is it's something that many individuals, I think even our community, struggles with a little bit. Is we're used to creating our own interfaces. We're used to being able to use whatever colors and buttons, and to some extent our customers are too. And so when we think about this version of the conversation, our success really in one of these hybrid designs where we're mixing AV and UC, it's to make sure that the customer experience is still the same. And I tell a number of programmers, and many people on the call have probably heard me say this, the measure of definition in these cases isn't the complexity of the user interface, it's the complexity that you can bury into the system while retaining the end user experience. If I have a multi-input system, does the user in the room actually have to be able to select present? If I have a system that's intelligent enough to determine last person plugged in or where is sync detected on a table. I mean, there's no need to flip to a page and make a selection of laptop input when there's only one laptop active. We have to think about it that way and kind of change our approach a little bit. We still have great value that we can bring to the equation, but it's manifested differently. It isn't, what color the buttons are, or how does it look, or things like that. We can still do that in those purely custom, purely bespoke environments. But for the regular systems, that measure of success has to be making sure that it's just as easy to use a 2-person room as it is for a 200-person room. And we think about it that way. So
here's just go back one slide.
Absolutely.
Again, I really think that point needs to be reinforced. If we talk about, again, simplicity of interface, that definition of success, these are the two largest platforms in the world today. We know that Microsoft, again, has announced that they've got, 200 million users, 85, unique users, 200 million users every day. Zoom certainly has, increased their market share over this, last few weeks as people have been working from home. The key, though, is that, look at the simplicity of the interface. They really wanted to design these systems so that there was, task-based functionality. You need only a couple of clicks to do those things. And that's part of their success, is that interface doesn't require, a ton of training. It doesn't necessarily require a user manual to operate, just simplicity of interface.
Great point, Jonathan. And like I said, it's not a case where there is no place for custom. It's putting your focus in the right location. I think the analogy that I like to give at the programming level, and programmers will appreciate this, right? It was always kind of a left brain, right brain that, part of you would be really good with code and then this other group would be really good with UI design, and you kind of have this split. And as we moved into some of these other technologies, when you think about HTML5, a good chunk of HTML5 is in the construct, it's in the code, it's not so much. And so think about this in a similar fashion, that really the measure for success is, to Jonathan's point, maintaining that experience at the same time, enhancing the overall solution, making it a better solution, putting it into a bigger room that the platform solutions themselves can't handle. There's still great value in doing so, and finding that blend, but protection of the interface or defense of the interface is the topic that you'll hear both of us say quite a bit. So last thing here I wanted to mention, in just terms of approach, a few things, right? Number one, stay current with the platforms. I mentioned Teams and Zoom, as Jonathan said, those are the two, but at the same time, stay current on what's going on with those solutions. What happens at the desktop in many of those solutions is a precursor for what's going to happen with the room solutions. And it also facilitates your conversation with the end user better, because hey, are you using this feature inside Teams or things like that? A lot of those will drive those conversations and will really build your relationship with the person on the other side. Number two, own the room. The system drops in, but there's still all those other components. You still have multiple inputs. You have professional audio solutions that get dropped in from the various manufacturers. You have environmental controls, things like that. The tool set is there, so just make sure that you continue to wrap your arms around the total space. It doesn't have to be just a drop-in. There's all the other things you can do. Last one, I do this a lot. Trade your education that you're picking up in exchange for the partnership with the individual. Take some extra time to educate them on what it looks like under the hood. A lot of the conversations that I'll have with the general IT or UC community about the room solutions, if you will, showing them under the hood. Here's how it operates. Here's how it works. Here's the details. Here's what's important to you. Be willing to make that trade. It isn't so much of the UC community is general knowledge. Jonathan and I have a couple colleagues on our team that are very proactive about publishing, because we want the community to have that information available. It isn't protected information. It is much, it's a different approach. It's shared, it's free flow. If you look at the schedule of events that are probably hitting your LinkedIn or your email of different things you can join this month, it's a reflection of that. The don'ts, right? Number one, don't try to fight the native interface. We see a lot of people doing that, and you simply cannot control when that other party will make a change. And if you build a solution based on emulation, then at what point do they change it? And then you think about this trickle down. You're better off investing your time behind the scenes as opposed to trying to match and keep up with that platform. It's just not sustainable. And unless the customer is willing to make that investment, it's not something that'll work out in the end, because at some point, why do we do it this way instead? Why didn't we just go with the native interface? That's the constant theme that we deal with. The design rules are critical. Don't fight them. What's published is published. Once you know the rules, then find ways to enhance your solution, but don't fight the rules. I'm going to use this DSP. It doesn't matter if it's certified or not. It does, because you can't guarantee the experience for the customer, nor can the platform manufacturer guarantee the experience either. They perform certification for a reason. It's to make sure that they can deliver on that experience. And the last one is the complexity, right? These systems are intended to be, walk up, one touch, things like that. Don't walk away from your value, just put it elsewhere. It doesn't have to be at the interface, but a smarter system, a system that reports additional details, a system that mines additional data and pulls it into the solution. All those opportunities are still there. We just have to change what our point of emphasis is and move it away from primarily being on the design of the interface and moving it to layering that somewhere else in the solution. There's still great value in doing so, but we just need to tweak that focus a little bit. Okay, Rich, that's AVUC. We've got one more session coming up. Anything, Jonathan, Rich, you want to talk about there? And certainly, as I mentioned, we have 3 more sessions inside Masters to talk about some of the UC topics as well. So certainly, I'm sure those will pop up there at the same time.
So I
So
think this
Jason,
is I'm sorry, Jonathan. I think
I
this
was
is a
gonna-
great opportunity to discuss a lot of the questions that have come up regarding XIO Cloud, Fusion, and analytics. And so what I actually would like to do is put together a poll that asks our team, does your company provide analytics as part of your solution? Okay, and take a look at that. It's a yes or no poll. It's an easy one. And as they're taking that poll, one of the things I'd like us to discuss with the team, which has come up quite a bit, where does XIO Cloud fit into this? Where does Fusion fit into this? Where's the balance between the two platforms? Are they going to merge together eventually? When do I use it? How do I use it, et cetera, and so forth? There's quite a bit that went back and forth with Fusion throughout that. We did have a great course on back on April 23rd that covers the cloud first design, and that is posted to Online Help 2015. But I think it's good to discuss how XIO Cloud and Fusion can be utilized in the unified communication scenarios as well.
Jonathan, you want to take first shot? Ronnie, either one?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a crack at it. I see them today as two, very complementary products. We have customers who have Fusion deployed already, and Fusion is a great, super powerful tool. It allows you to, again, gather analytics and gather information about systems and look at, things like utilization and online and offline status, and, can really be customized to meet whatever needs are required. I guess that's maybe one of the key differences between the two is that Fusion does require programming to implement. Fusion is very powerful, can communicate with third-party devices, but all of those things have to be programmed. They have to be implemented. And so there's a certain workflow or roadmap that you have to define in terms of how that data is going to be collected, how is it going to be reported, where is it going to be reported in order to really be successful with Fusion. And maybe that's also where XIO takes over. XIO, because it's built into firmware, doesn't require any programming. It doesn't require any implementation. It's built into firmware, it works automatically, and so it's a matter of just enrolling the devices within the XIO Cloud account, and now we can get that information. There's a lot of crossover that's starting to happen now, and so we're starting to bring that Fusion feature set into XIO Cloud, and I think if we look at the roadmap in terms of the next few years, certainly there's an opportunity to bring those pieces together. Today we don't have a lot of third-party support in XIO Cloud, but we're about to do that in very short order with a couple of manufacturer partners. So we have again an XIO REST API. And if I were to look into my crystal ball, I could see where we would take, the concept of Crestron Connected and now port that same concept into XIO Cloud. So that's really where I see the two pieces. Again, I think that they both provide great value. It's about finding the right solution for the right need.
So I'll tell you, Jonathan, I know we announced at ISE third-party partnerships with XIO Cloud. And that is coming later this year. I was hoping it was going to be this summer, but it's probably going to be the fall. But the intent is that, there's a question that came up about the single pane of glass. How do you implement that? How do you make that work? And one of the things is that XIO Cloud's long-term goal is to become that single pane of glass that allows the customer to monitor and manage their entire deployment. Today, the deployment and monitoring can be done cleanly from XIO Cloud. The true data aggregator, which someone else was asking about, is Fusion, right? And it's pulling all the data aggregation from the systems based on how you've programmed it. But down the line, our long-term goal is that you have that single pane of glass with XIO Cloud to manage your systems, to deploy your systems, to maintain and update your systems, and to report on your systems from that location, or at least have the data available to a Power BI instance, for example, which will do a much nicer job of giving you pretty pictures, graphs, and items. But that is the long-term roadmap for Fusion and XIO Cloud. And we did cover that in our Cloud First design, which is posted on Online Help as well.
So looking at the poll results there, Rich.
So 56% of our customers do provide analytics as part of their solution, and 45% of you don't. It's a great opportunity for you as a designer to help specify that in your system. Is what can you bring to your customer? Do they want to know what they're using, when they're using it, how it's being used on a device level, on a space level as well? You can also track how your rooms are being used. In fact, next week we're teaching environmental design course, which is a great opportunity to understand how you can design the environment for which you can report on and provide that information to the executive team of a facility to ensure they understood why they invested in the technology they're using.
And there's some very pertinent topics, Rich, that are going to come to light for our community in the next few months. And when we start to think about, return to work, and we start to think about analytics, there's a significant intersection between those two that many of you are going to be asked for. And it's important to have a strategy for that. Not only room use, but also, taking that next step into mining additional detail to give them some behavioral results on their company, because those are going to be the questions that they're going to be asking is how many people are in this room, or, you think about the infinite number of questions that may come up when we start to think about that. Companies are going to be adopting their own policies on distancing, within the organization, within the enterprise, and analytics will feed right into that. So if you're not already invested, great opportunity to dive into this space.
Yeah, and a small thing I want to add in that case is that it's the end user that can do that. They don't need to call the dealer for that. So they can, as an end user, as an IT director or a facility manager, they can get that data, they can get that figures out and put it on the management board, and you can see how many times that room is being used, yes or no.
Great stuff. Okay, Rich, we'll
why don't we continue on? We'll stop the poll, and we'll have another one before the end.
Okay, excellent. So our last section here that we'll go through, each of the four of us really wanted to talk just for a couple minutes on pertinent items or things that we had seen in the space. And so each of us are going to kind of walk you through what we're seeing and take a little bit of detail what our thoughts are. Not necessarily a crystal ball, but at the same point, some topics that as a community, I think it's important that take this in and then make some investment in your time of exploring some of these opportunities. So Jonathan, let's kick off with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, to maybe bring it back around and make it a little bit timely, certainly, we had the presentation, webinar earlier this week where we talked about the top 10 trends in AV, and building the touchless room is certainly the #1 thing today. I've taken more calls in the last 4 weeks about how do I make my system, frictionless, touch-free. People are concerned about the surfaces we're touching, and so, how do we remove that? How do we take that requirement to interact away from the touch perspective? So sensor-driven automation obviously is something that we've been able to do for a long time, and that goes a long way. We have a brand new PoE occupancy sensor where we can use that to turn the room on when the system turn the room on when the system is activated through the occupancy sensor. That can also do things like provide information on connectivity and control options. So again, today we've released a brand new Media Firmware. So now you can provide information on how somebody could go to a website and download the application to control an Media device and start presentation. And so now they're using only their personal device. That's all they have to touch. So they walk into the room, the screens come to life, and they're provided with information from that, again, single pane of glass that's in the room about maybe what's going on in the room and how to get connected and how to make the room operational or functional. And that can still be customized, right? That can still be customized and optimized for each individual organization's needs. Other sensors, things like people counting, things like light sensors. We have a whole host of sensors today that we can leverage to provide that information, again, in those analytics about the room to build that almost touchless room. Providing a lot of functionality. Now, obviously, there's still some things. Again, Media can do wireless presentation, but if you need to do wired presentation, you might still need to touch a cable. And so what does that look like? That minimizes now the number of surfaces that we need to touch and makes a room still operational, Not a lot of code, not a lot of programming required, but a high level of functionality. There are still some limitations though. Go ahead, move to the next slide. There are still some limitations. Depending on the space, there may be some physical limitations. This particular graphic, obviously this is a sort of an open office. And so we could do some things, maybe we need to do something like voice control. Is that an option? Is that going to interfere with other spaces? In terms of voice control, what platform do we use? Certainly Alexa, Amazon, has a platform. One of the challenges there is that's today only hosted in one data center on the Amazon side. So if there are some geographical limitations, certainly, the group that's here today is representative of people that are all over the world. And so there are that many languages and that many accents, and there's a learning process that needs to go into doing that voice control. So it becomes a question of, do we want to invest that time and those resources to do that? There's also a security component. Again, we think about GDPR, we think about California compliance. Where is that data going? So where is that security, I guess, where's that security item? What are the implications? Again, for voice control to work, we have to take that voice data, we have to pass it out to a server. So that also means we need to be able to access the internet or the network at large. The other piece that I talk a lot about is accessibility. And we think about things like AODA in the US, or AODA here in Ontario, or ADA in the US. The ability to physically interact with things. And we think about that a lot from the physical building perspective. We have ramps, we have door openers. One of the things that I talk a lot about in my conversations around design is we should never allow technology to be the barrier to entry into a room. A room should never be so complicated that when I walk in, I'm immediately overwhelmed by the level of technology or the level of sophistication that it takes to make a room operational. So, that's a big part of making sure that room is accessible as much as it's touchless. The other part of the last part, I guess, that I want to talk a little bit about is we should always still continue to build for data acquisition. We really want to, again, capture that information about the room, and whether that's things like people counting. How many people are in the room? How many people are using the room? To build that ROI story, to build that business case for, putting the technology in the room, for showing usability patterns, for showing functionality. When we've again, Fusion's now a 15-year-old product, Rich. Is 15 years we've been doing Fusion now, that we've been having that conversation and telling people that they need to build. And RoomView was 2003? 2004.
Yeah, so 17 years.
Pretty long in the tooth.
Yeah, it can go drive at this point on its own.
And here we are, right? We still, there was a time when we talked about, are people using VGA? Are people using VCRs? Well, the reality is are people using UC? Are people using the codec? What are people using in the room, and how do we help maximize that? So use those sensors, tie into the other systems, gather that data. Certainly the building management industry has been doing this for a long time. As part of a LEED certification, you go through, you commission a building, and a year later you come back and you recommission and you look at that data. Have you optimized airflow? Have you optimized temperature? And so we can do very similar things on the AV side. We can use those tools, the sensors, the controls, the connectivity, to provide us information. And that helps us make more intelligent decisions moving forward as to whether people need different functionality. Do people need more air medias? Do they need less air medias? Do they need more huddle spaces, more large meeting rooms now? We've been moving away from large meeting rooms because of the need for smaller huddle spaces. But now with things like physical distancing requirements, maybe we need to go back. Maybe we need to move back to a 10-person meeting room that's really only hosting 4 people. So think about these things as you go into your design. The touchless room is not impossible. There are some things that need to be considered, but it's definitely achievable at a high level, again, with some customization and some optimization to facilitate. And we actually do, again, we get you probably 90% of the way there today with systems that we have that work out of the box and by connecting some sensors.
Good stuff, Jonathan. Thank you. All right, food for thought. Like I said, this will be, if Jonathan's getting that many questions, I'm getting the same. I'm sure many of you in our community are in the same boat. It'll continue to be a hot topic. Determine an approach first, maybe. Figure out, how far you're willing to go into it. Organizationally, you have to make some decisions there. And there are a number of things that we provide, a number of things that you may need to invest in yourself to create that experience. Okay. Rich is going to take us through the next session, and I think he speaks from experience as it relates to masters in our training department. He's going to talk about new approaches for instructional design.
It's thank you, Jason. It's interesting how in the past 2 months, our entire world has been turned upside down. To be honest, we had been planning to move our training systems, our training offerings, to a more interactive online rollout come July of this year, along with a new training website launch. Yes, I did say a new training website launch. We're going to make it easier to register, to track training for yourselves, and see what you need to take. With the unfortunate series of events that has taken place, we flipped our instructor-led in-person courses. We took 9 of them in a week and a half, rewrote the curriculum, and moved them to an online experience. We took our programming courses, which required control processors, migrated 160 control processors and put them out available externally with rotating passwords and authentication and security implemented to do all this fun stuff. And the amazing thing is we did this without actually being in the buildings. So thanks to cooperation of our IT team, we were able to migrate and change our entire approach to education. As you are all very evident of it now, we are redoing our entire master's program this year this way. There are advantages to interactive and there are disadvantages to interactive instructional approach. One of the advantages is interacting with each other, and we see it going on in the chat window, which is wonderful to do online, but much better in person. In fact, a lot of the comments we got from people who attended Masters said to us, the one thing I get out of Masters is the 50% of knowledge I get from Crestron and 50% of knowledge I get from exchanging ideas face-to-face with others. What's incredible is the amount of questions and answers that are going back and forth today with over 1,475 people on the call with us. That's phenomenal. But at the same time, putting them all in a single location, sharing ideas, sharing thoughts, having great communication, building a network is phenomenal. So you have that balance, right? There is a big disadvantage to online classes. When you don't have the equipment in front of you to work on, that aha moment isn't as powerful. For some things, it can be good, but it's just not quite the same level. And, in a lot of online courses, not every major is available, let's face it, the reality. And even for us, DMCE, we have yet to figure out an intelligent way to put that online. How do we certify you're making a Cat6 cable correctly? One of the questions came up earlier. How do I do that? Well, we have documentation. You can take it, you can learn, but how do you validate that it's correct? You also have to make sure that people are paying attention. Let's face it, I am sure that while we're doing this training session, many of you have a chat window going, an email window going, and you're distracted while doing it. So you may not be paying the same level of attention you would be in a class. And as an instructor, I can't go and look you right in the eye and say, good morning, wake up, welcome to the class, or good evening, as the case may be. And that's an important aspect in a online course. It changes the way you do things. However, you can be more flexible. You can offer more sessions. You can reach more people. You can scan through things quickly. Okay. Now you're going to say, well, from MTA, why do we have to be here? Well, we want to interact with you. And so what we've done is an instructor-led online curriculum. We want your opinion. We want to poll you. We want your feedback. We want your communications in the chat window. We really want to interact with you and have a dialogue. And in an ideal manner, we'd be able to open up and have you raise your hand and answer live for everybody. But our big concern is going to be the quality of audio, understanding each other, and making sure that it works correctly. I do see there are a few people who've raised their hand, and I'm sure they'd like to discuss with us. And if time allows, we may open that up. But it is important to be able to do all these things, to be able to balance online and in person. And by putting together both, you really get the best approach. It's a change in the way we teach. It's an evolution of distance learning. I remember, God, I don't want to admit this, 25 years ago, putting in a distance learning system at Pace University between their 3 campuses. And what they did is they had a big camera at the front of the room, a big camera at the back of the room. They had 3 displays at the front of the room, a display at the back of the room, and they did the exact same rooms in the 3 campuses. So you could see the classrooms and the teacher could do distance learning. Now, here we are, you're sitting at your laptop. Maybe you have a 2 display, 3 display, 4 display setup. Some of you have control rooms built in your offices, which is great, to take interactive online approach. It's a very, very different way to do things, okay? What is really important in any of these things, whether they're self-paced, just watch a video, is making the content important. Whether they're webinars where we're preaching and sharing information with you, or truthfully sharing thoughts and ideas interactively, which is the best way to learn, the world has changed. And you as designers have a whole new approach to look at things differently. For those of you who understand the power of Flex, this can become a very, very powerful tool in a design application. Putting it in this classroom, putting in our airboard solution. Now think about this. If I'm an instructor and I have to teach at home, but I'm used to writing on a blackboard or a whiteboard in my school. Well, if I put a whiteboard in the house and I put an airboard solution with it, guess what? I can go back to that same concept of creating my content on a whiteboard the way I, as an instructor, know how to do things. I tie it in with my Flex system. And guess what? I can now teach online with a whiteboard interactively with my students. There are different design approaches, and we're going to cover that throughout the MTA sessions this month that offer you new insights and new approaches in designing systems in today's world. It has changed incredibly quickly. You know, we sat at ISE back in February and we talked about designs and new products and where we're going. And in 2 months, the entire world has changed. Your approach as design engineers needs to think differently, to approach things differently. How do you collaborate and work in a new space? Your environments are going to change that you design for. The people you're interacting with, are they going to be comfortable being in large groups? Probably not for a while. It'll be a small group approach. How do you get the information shared? How do you tie the various different systems together to make it meet the needs of the customer? Solve the challenge they have with an incredible design from yourselves integrating the right tools to be successful. And you too can make money coming out of this to help society and to help our customers be successful. So having said all that, I did want to ask one more quick question for the team, which is, do you factor the overall cost of implementation as a designer? As you design your systems, as you begin to put together your systems, are you responsible to factor in the cost to deploy, the cost to maintain your systems, and the cost to implement, right? So think about that. What is your responsibility as a designer? How much impact do you have in your designs as planning as part of that? So we'll let that run for a little bit. And I turn it back to Mr. Molden, who I think is going to hand it off to Ronnie.
I am. I'm going to let Ronnie go ahead with his topic.
Okay.
Ronnie.
Hello. Do I wait for the poll or do I start?
I think you can start. The poll's going to be done in about a minute. So, but let's, because we're running close on time here. Actually, we've gone over on time. I hope you all don't mind. But you've had so many great questions. We will answer everything via the end of class. We'll send a link to the information, and you'll get all the answers to your questions if we can't answer them during the session. All right, Ronnie, go ahead.
Okay, so hi guys. So for me, I want to bring up as topic of the day a trend that's USB-C. From the designing perspective, we see those questions a lot and we try to advise and answer those. So to say, Crestron does every year, every couple of years, we do a laptop study. this study I'm showing you is made of March 2019, last year. So it's a year ago we did that study, and we study all the connection ports on the laptops that are shipped out from different manufacturers. And in that study, we see the report that basically VGA is basically dead. We see that DisplayPort is also going away from that. But the most interesting piece of this report is that USB-C is taking over. So USB-C is the primarily laptop connectivity that manufacturers are using. You have different reasons for that. It's a very small connectivity. Laptops are being more thinner and smaller, so it's very easy to add this connection in your laptop and to connect that. It's also reversible, so you never can connect it wrong. Everybody has that you're trying to plug in your HDMI without looking, and you need to turn it around. And also, your USB-C can do everything. It's your power. It's your video content signal. It's your USB accessory port, and also your network. So in that case, it's one connection cable, connection port that gives you all those kind of things. So USB is your true universal connector, and we see even that manufacturers are only implementing USB-C ports on their laptops. So not even HDMI is on there. So for us, this report is very interesting and very important because now we can see in which way our connectivities, what the focus will be of those connection ports. So which kind of port do we need to support in the future? So in this case, it's a very interesting part. Advising that Crestron can offer you can easily, for your designs, you can easily support an HDMI and USB-C, because I don't think that you can now fully design only on USB-C. HDMI will be for a long time on the market, so it's better you propose the two, but you can with an HDMI 4x100, an HDMI switcher, 4 inputs, 1 output, you can easily use our USB-C to HDMI cables. So you have your USB-C connection point and your HDMI connection point on the table. On the back end, you have 2 HDMIs connecting on your HDMI switch and sending over your video content to the display. So you can offer an easy auto switching solution for the end user. Do you need USB charging? No problem. We have our USB charger connection plate on our new flip tops, the FT2s. And even you can add a USB-C cable retractor on that. And then you have 2 options. You have the USB charger and also your USB-C connection cable through a retractor. And you have the 2 options on one platform on the flip top. So basically, what I just want to give those strengths of the USB-C is that from a design perspective, it's good that you know that USB will is more coming, is more taking over in the future, and that from a Crestron perspective, as a design, you really can offer as in today, you can offer a solution where you are set for many years. So that's a bit my topic of the day.
Great points, Ronnie. Great points. And it's something that I think you had one of the best points you made there is the fact that there are still some things to work through from a solution standpoint: power, video, Ethernet, all the other things that go into play. And it will be something our design community will have to stay on top of as we move forward with these solutions. See our results there, Rich, from the poll. The last part here that we're going to wrap up with. So that's a great result, Rich, in terms of number of people that are actually thinking about implementation. And I think if there is a factor that we need to consider today, speed of install is going to be critical for a lot of these organizations. Many of our customers are only going to get in a limited amount of time, A, to get rooms turned over before employees return to work, but also B, in terms of allowable time in the space too. So I'm very excited to see the implementations front of mind in the community. The last part here I want to go through and skip the slide is the work from home topic. I think many of us, if we've been watching the news, we've seen, and I think a little bit maybe surprising, Rich and I were having this conversation that it's been somewhat surprising to see mainstream media from the house and having significant challenges with cameras and sound and the number of sessions. I think some of you might have seen it. I've seen it both on a CNN broadcast domestically and also on a BBC broadcast. Echo canceling wasn't working correctly in the call because we're dealing with users that may have, not even have earbuds in or headset or things like that. And so the thing I think that our community should continue to look at is that here we are in this current state of things, and hopefully we're moving towards a case where people are returning to work and things are getting better. But now you also start to hear the conversation, prepare for the winter, prepare for the fall. I think that we will see some crossover though at the same time, thinking about bringing some more of the professional solutions into the home environment. Now, maybe it's not every single person, but when you think about if there are key members of your organization, leadership, things along those lines, that they need to be able to appropriately transmit, broadcast, communicate from the home environment, I think we're looking at the opportunity for some crossover. Virtual backgrounds are amazing. We're using them here. I think everyone's taking advantage of them with Zoom and Teams, but there are some cases where the virtual background, maybe you don't need to use the virtual background. Maybe it's an address, maybe it's an all hands meeting or something like that, and maybe that's not the appropriate step and you need something else. So I think we have to look at this potential long-term strategy that we might see a larger influx of pro or professional equipment, moving into the home environment. And a couple things to keep in mind that we think about some of these solutions. One of the things that I've seen go awry in a couple presentations is users that aren't comfortable with their personal device also being used as their presentation device. Let's imagine a C-suite from an organization who has confidential documentation, and he fires up a Teams call or a Zoom call, and it gets shared inadvertently to the other side. There's certainly cases for that. A great way to look at that is to have a bit of a firewall between devices. And you think about having an independent device that is just for conferencing and allowing the user's laptop, personal device continue to be for business purposes, and having that separation between the two. If you think about the room solutions, they're all self-healing. Both Microsoft Teams rooms, Zoom rooms have overnight reboots, resets, effectively to bring themselves back into operation, adjust any things. Laptops probably won't have that. You're thinking about traditional functionality from an IT management standpoint, but you're not thinking about health in that case. Remote management capabilities. A device in someone's home is very similar to the device down the hall. I can leverage those tools to be able to manage the device. I can run test calls. The systems do that automatically. Jonathan and I both had the same story. When things first started to change and we opted to close some of our doors, we both brought home our Zoom systems, and both of us, within the same week, 2 a.m. in the morning, it runs an acoustic test, and it does that automatically. Things like that the systems do that maybe we're familiar with, but we know that they're in the background. The other thing too to think about is production assistance. There are ways to bring in some of these devices into your larger scale events. They can be controlled remotely. It doesn't require someone sitting there. It's the equivalent of the operator board. So my thought there is this is an area certainly to keep tabs on, that we may see more of an influx. The picture there on the left is from a customer case study that we did, but to be honest, take a step back and look at that picture, and if I said, hey, is this someone's basement or is this a meeting room, you may not necessarily know, because architecturally, this could be more of a casual space, and I think we'll see some of that blend a little bit. So my topic then is to keep tabs on this potential crossover between the corporate environment and bringing better technology for production into the home. We're not all AV guys, we're not all IT guys, but certainly we can leverage some skills to help others in our organization create better experiences or better presentations for the company at large. All right, with that said, give you a quick recap on some resources. Rich's presentation there, as we send this out, has all the links, some great topics in there to review. I wanted to point out some key items, thinking about websites, crestron.com/masters for all information. For our sales support team, from Ronnie's standpoint, we have a sales support microsite you can visit for additional design resources. Our Crestron Training Institute will drive you to many of those offerings that Rich mentioned. Jonathan brought up the Crestron Security Portal. You have the ability to browse through all that relevant detail. And then lastly, some contacts on our side, certainly all of us. But in addition, for design-specific pre-sales purposes, we have teams in all three areas of the world. We have our USA team in New Jersey, and then we have our EMEA team Ronnie's part of, and then we also have our team in APAC, Asia Pacific, and we have appropriate links there as well. So feel free to reach out to us or to any of them as well for additional resources. Okay, Rich, any last mentions there on Q&A, anything else? Otherwise, I think we're probably about to wrap up.
Yeah, we did go long. We thank you all for staying with us. I think we did cover quite a bit on the USB-C. Ronnie, there was one quick question. Where was the survey you did on USB-C sourced from?
It's from engineering.
And
I
they
think
sourced it.
Yeah, it's engineering that did they sourced it indeed.
Okay, so let's see if we get that information and respond. That's a question that came up. So we'll get that answer for Abby, who asked that question.
I do see a lot of why Crestron is not adding USB-C in their products. This is something on the roadmap. In a short time, we will bring products where USB with charging and with video will be implemented. So stay tuned on that. So that will come in the future. For the rest, I don't think there was a lot.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Jason, Ronnie, Jonathan, gentlemen, do you have any last parting comments before we wrap up?
No, I mean, look, there's been a ton of questions. I mean, from my perspective, thanks to everybody for giving us a couple hours this morning. Thank you for all of your input. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get to all of the questions, but we'll do our best to answer them and again, provide those back in follow-up. Again, feel free to reach out to us if there's specific questions you want to ask. Myself, Jason, the rest of the team, True Blue support, we're always happy to help you with whatever questions.
Great. Okay.
At the end of all of our sessions, we're going to give you a roll forward so you know what the next session is, just as reminders. So the next master session will be Thursday this week. That's actually my other session, and we'll be discussing flex design concepts, going a little bit deeper into the items we talked about today and talking about strategy, and then we'll just continue to roll forward throughout the month. There's some great topics. RSVP at crestron.com, crestron.com/masters if you need any additional assistance. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for being part of the Crestron community of masters. And like I said, Rich and I both are very excited, specifically because of MTA, that we can bring a number of additional people into the community. So we hope you have a great month. We hope you enjoy the topics. We hope you pass your exam. And we hope to see you in person next year when we resume our events.
Great. Thank you all. Gentlemen, I appreciate you being here to present for our wonderful community. Thank you, community, for being here with us. We really look forward to seeing you on our next course on May 7th. It is going to be a great month, a great opportunity to share information, to share ideas. And again, we will answer your questions and we'll get that information to you by the end of the week. And it will all be posted to Online Help ID 2015. Please sign up to receive notifications on Online Help 2015. So when the videos and the information gets posted there, you will also receive a notification that you can watch it. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day. For those of you who stayed up late, thank you so much for staying up late. For those of you who got up early, thank you for getting up early. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you all soon. Be well, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you much. Bye all.
Everybody.